Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, it is free, and it is the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic and emotional stories like this one. Your support truly means the world to us. And tell me, where are you watching from today? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let us go back to our main character. You understand that once that bucket drops, 400 homes lose water, right? I shouted over the diesel engine. Meredith Voss didn't even look at me. She lifted one manicured hand, pointed at my well shed, and said, "Tear the ugly thing down." The excavator's steel bucket swung through the morning haze. It hit the corrugated roof with a crack that sounded like a rifle shot. Rusted metal folded. Cedar boards burst outward. The sharp stink of diesel, wet soil, and chlorine rolled across the gravel. Inside the shed, a pressure gauge trembled against its brass fitting. 62 pounds per square inch. 50, 30, then 0. The alarm on my phone began screaming before the dust reached me. Low system pressure. Pump control failure. Main line interrupted. Across Briarstone Estates, 400 kitchen faucets coughed brown air. Shower heads sputtered. Washing machines groaned and stopped mid-cycle. A woman rinsing shampoo from her daughter's hair stared at a dry pipe. An elderly man twisted the handle above his bathroom sink and got nothing but a hollow metallic hiss. 2 streets away, firefighters opened a hydrant during a routine pressure test. The hose collapsed at their boots like an empty snake. Meredith stood beside her white Range Rover in a cream-colored blazer, watching the building fall with the satisfied smile of someone removing a dead tree. She had spent 6 months calling the shed an eyesore. She claimed its faded siding frightened buyers. She said the patched tin roof ruined photographs for Briarstone's new luxury development. To her, it was 40 years of ugly lumber sitting between her stone entrance monument and a 6-figure sales commission. To me, it was the only structure keeping every house behind her supplied with clean groundwater. The excavator struck again. This time the bucket ripped the electrical cabinet from the wall. Blue sparks snapped through the dust. The control panel hit the ground face first, dragging cables and copper tubing behind it. A pressurized pipe split beneath the machine's track. Water erupted in a muddy arc, spraying the operator's windshield and turning the gravel black. "Shut it down," I yelled. The operator hesitated. Meredith stepped closer and slapped a folder against her palm. "You have authorization," she called. "That man is trespassing." That man was me, Cole Danner. Licensed groundwater systems technician, former county infrastructure inspector, 3rd-generation owner of the parcel she was standing on. I ran past the orange safety cones, boots sliding through mud, and reached the red isolation valve buried beside the foundation. The metal wheel fought me. I wrapped both hands around it and turned until my shoulders burned. The pipe hammered beneath my feet. Then everything went silent. No pump vibration, no relay click. No steady hum under the ground. Just dripping water, ticking metal, and the excavator idling above the remains of my father's work. Meredith finally looked at me. "You just shut off the neighborhood's water," she said loudly enough for the cameras behind her. I stared at the oily runoff pooling inches from the exposed well casing. "No," I said. "I stopped 400 families from drinking what you just dumped into it." Her smile lasted 11 more minutes. That was how long it took the first residents to arrive carrying empty bottles, angry phones, and the message Meredith had already sent to every homeowner. Private well operator intentionally terminates community service. She thought she had destroyed an ugly shed and found someone convenient to blame. What she didn't know was that every pressure reading, every warning email, and every second of her demolition order had already been recorded. And buried beneath the broken cedar boards was a brass plaque that could bring her entire HOA down. 3 days before Meredith buried my father's well shed under 6 tons of steel, the system was humming exactly the way it had for 37 years. I arrived before sunrise with a thermos of black coffee and the same ring of brass keys my father used to carry. The gravel crackled beneath my boots. Cold mist clung to the pasture, and the little cedar building stood under the cottonwoods with its patched metal roof shining silver in the dark. Most people saw an ugly shed. I heard a heartbeat. The pump motor carried a low, steady vibration through the floorboards. A relay clicked inside the control cabinet. Water moved beneath me through 12-inch pipe, quiet and heavy, feeding every kitchen, shower, hydrant, and washing machine in Briarstone Estates. I checked the pressure gauge first. 62 psi, exactly where it belonged. I wrote the number in a black maintenance ledger, the same way my father had taught me when I was 14. Date, time, pressure, chlorine level, generator fuel. Nothing fancy, just pencil marks stacked across decades, each one proving the system had been alive and working. My name is Cole Danner. I'm 48 years old, a licensed groundwater systems technician, and until 6 years ago, I inspected public infrastructure for the county. Pumps, drainage systems, storage tanks, emergency generators. If it carried water, held pressure, or could poison somebody when neglected, I probably crawled inside it. The well parcel had belonged to my family long before Briarstone existed. My grandfather drilled the original shaft in 1968 when the surrounding land was cattle pasture. My father, Walter, replaced the pump and built the cedar shed in 1989 after a winter freeze split the first housing apart. He made the door himself. Crooked hinges, oversized bolts, a brass plaque mounted above the latch. Danner Well Facility, 1989. I used to tease him about it. Looks like you're naming a courthouse, I told him. He wiped sawdust from his mustache and said, anything people depend on deserves a name. Back then, the well supplied our house, 2 neighboring farms, and a roadside feed store. Then developers arrived with survey flags and glossy brochures. Pastures became cul-de-sacs. Barns became luxury homes. Briarstone Estates grew around our parcel until 400 houses depended on the same aquifer my grandfather had found. The HOA didn't own the well. That detail mattered. A recorded utility agreement allowed the subdivision to receive water from our system, but the land, equipment, and operating authority remained with my family. Briarstone paid a maintenance assessment. I kept the pumps running. It had worked for 22 years because everyone understood the difference between access and ownership. Everyone except Meredith Voss. I finished the chlorine test, then opened the generator cabinet. The smell of diesel and cold metal filled the shed. Fuel tank full. Battery clean. Automatic transfer switch ready. Along the concrete floor, a blue painted line marked the sanitary protection zone surrounding the well casing. Nothing could be excavated, stored, or constructed inside it. Not landscaping stone. Not fuel. Not heavy machinery. I touched up a chipped section with a small brush. Another habit from my father. Before locking the door, I paused beside his photograph hanging above the workbench. He was younger than I remembered, wearing a denim shirt and resting one hand on the brand new pressure tank. Behind him, the cedar boards were still golden. By then, they had faded gray. The roof carried rust around the screws. The building leaned half an inch toward the east. It wasn't beautiful, but when I switched off the light, the pump kept humming in the darkness. 400 homes slept without noticing it. And 72 hours later, Meredith would decide that silence meant the building had no purpose. Meredith Voss gave me 72 hours to erase 37 years of history. The notice was taped to the well shed door with 2 strips of bright red contractor's tape. It snapped in the morning wind like a warning flag. Architectural noncompliance. Unapproved accessory structure. Mandatory removal deadline. Friday, 8 a.m. I read it twice while the pump hummed beneath my boots. Then I looked across the road. Meredith stood beside a black SUV with a photographer, a landscape architect, and 3 men wearing expensive shoes that had never touched real mud. Behind them, survey stakes outlined the entrance to Briarstone Phase 2. A polished rendering rested on an easel, stone columns, ornamental pear trees, a fountain, and 64 new luxury homes glowing beneath an artificial sunset. My well shed was missing from the picture. Meredith wore a pale blue blazer and sunglasses large enough to hide any trace of conscience. She pointed toward my property while the photographer adjusted his lens. "Could you angle farther left?" she said. "Keep that structure out of the frame." I crossed the road with the violation notice in my hand. "You put this on private utility property." She glanced at the paper as though seeing it for the first time. "It's been discussed by the architectural committee. There is no committee authority here." Her smile remained perfectly still. "Everything visible from Briarstone is subject to community standards. That isn't how property law works." One of the investors shifted his weight. Meredith noticed. She lowered her voice. Nobody buying an $800,000 home wants to see that thing. The word thing landed harder than it should have. My father had cut every cedar board himself. My grandfather had chosen the well location with a steel-sounding rod and 40 years of ranching instinct. That building had kept water flowing through freezes, droughts, blackouts, and 2 wildfires. Meredith saw weathered wood. I saw 400 service connections. I returned an hour later with a document folder thick enough to bend under its own weight. The recorded parcel map was on top. Beneath it sat the utility agreement, operating permit, sanitary zone survey, inspection history, and the county's active facility registration. I spread everything across the hood of her SUV. This parcel belongs to the Danner family, I said. The HOA has water access. It does not own the land, the pump, the building, or the right to alter any part of this system. Meredith didn't touch the papers. Her eyes stayed on the photographer. You can relocate it. No, the well casing is beneath the floor. Then build something attractive around it. You cannot construct inside the protection zone. She gave me the same patient expression people use on children and inconvenient employees. Cole, your resistance does not create special rights. I tapped the red deadline notice. And this paper doesn't create yours. That afternoon, I sent everything again by certified mail and email. I included photographs of the pressure system, diagrams of the main line, and the county warning prohibiting excavation near the casing. My final paragraph was plain. Any attempt to demolish or disturb this facility may interrupt the sole potable water supply, serving approximately 400 residences, and could expose the system to contamination. Her reply arrived 19 minutes later. Your exaggerations do not create authority. If the structure remains after the deadline, the association will arrange removal and charge all costs to the owner. I printed the email while the paper was still warm. Then I placed it inside the black maintenance ledger. Outside, the pump clicked into another cycle. 62 psi, steady as a heartbeat. Meredith had 72 hours to reconsider. Instead, she used them to find a bulldozer. At 7:43 Friday morning, my phone screamed before the excavator reached the shed. Motion detected, well parcel. I was 6 miles away, standing in line for coffee, when the camera feed opened. A yellow machine crawled through my gate. Its tracks crushed the gravel into the mud. Behind it came Meredith's white SUV and a flatbed carrying fencing panels and stone columns for her new entrance. I left the coffee on the counter. By the time my truck hit Briarstone Road, the pump monitor was flashing 62 psi. Normal pressure. Normal flow. No system faults. I called the contractor's number painted across the excavator. A man answered over the engine noise. This is Brent Kessler. You're on an active water facility, I said. Stop the machine. Silence. Then his voice changed. What kind of facility? The only potable water source for 400 homes. I heard him shout at someone. The excavator stopped. For 9 seconds. Meredith stepped into view on the camera, phone in one hand, demolition order in the other. Her mouth moved before the audio caught up. Continue. I drove faster. When I reached the parcel, Brent stood beside the shed with his hard hat pushed back. He had opened the service door and seen what Meredith refused to see. Industrial wiring. Pressure tanks. Chlorination equipment. A county registration plate bolted above the control cabinet. This isn't abandoned, he told her. Meredith slapped the folder against her palm. The HOA has legal authorization. Brent pointed at the blue line painted around the foundation. That marking means sanitary protection zone. It means old paint. I jumped from my truck before it stopped rolling. Brent, shut it down. Meredith turned. Her sunglasses reflected the excavator behind me. You are trespassing on an association work site. My name is on the deed. Your objection has been documented. She signed the bottom of a liability waiver resting on the hood of her SUV, then handed it to Brent. Proceed. Brent didn't move. Meredith looked at the operator. You heard me. The engine rose. The bucket lifted. Steel teeth punched through the roof. The sound hit my chest before the debris hit the ground. Cedar boards exploded outward. Rusted metal folded around the bucket. The brass plaque above the door disappeared beneath a sheet of tin. My phone vibrated. 54 psi. Then 41. The second strike tore the electrical cabinet from the wall. Blue sparks snapped through the dust. A relay box hit the concrete and shattered. The pump began cycling too fast, hammering water through the main line. Stop, Brent shouted. The left track rolled across the blue protection line. Something cracked underground. Pressure dropped to 23. A pipe burst beside the foundation. Water shot upward in a brown arc, striking the excavator windshield. The operator slammed the controls, but the damage was already moving beneath us. I smelled hydraulic oil, then chlorine. The exposed well casing sat inches from a spreading black sheen. My training took over. If contaminated runoff entered that opening, every connected faucet could carry it. I ran through the mud toward the red isolation valve. Meredith followed, shouting that I was interfering with authorized work. The valve will resisted like it had welded itself shut. I wrapped both hands around it and pulled. Metal groaned. The main line hammered beneath my knees. 17 sighed. 9. I turned until the wheel locked. The vibration stopped. For the first time in 37 years, the well shed went silent. Meredith stared at the dead gauge. Then she raised her phone and began recording me. You just shut off water to 400 homes. I looked at the oil creeping toward the open casing. No, I said. I stopped you from poisoning them. Behind her, the first emergency alert reached every house in Briarstone. And Meredith was already writing the lie she planned to send with it. Meredith's lie reached 400 homes before the first repair truck reached the well. At 8:06 a.m., every resident in Briarstone received the same emergency message. Private well operator has intentionally suspended community water service during an ongoing property dispute. The HOA is pursuing immediate legal remedies. She never mentioned the excavator. She never mentioned the broken pipe, the exposed casing, or the hydraulic oil spreading through the mud. She made it sound like I had folded my arms, turned a valve, and decided 400 families could go thirsty until I got my way. By 8:19, the first cars arrived. They lined both sides of the road, doors slamming, engines idling, phones already recording. Parents carried empty bottles. Men in work clothes shouted across the safety tape. A woman held up her phone and demanded that I explain why her children could not wash their hands. Meredith stood near the entrance in front of a local news camera. She had removed her sunglasses. Her expression was calm, wounded, almost maternal. We begged Mr. Danner to cooperate, she said. Unfortunately, he appears willing to use essential water service as leverage against this community. I was 20 yards away, kneeling in oily mud while Brent helped me cover the well casing with a temporary steel cap. The smell of diesel clung to my clothes. My palms were bleeding where the valve well had torn through the skin. Nobody pointed a camera at that. Turn it back on. Someone shouted. Another voice joined him. Then 10 more. The words rolled across the parcel like thunder. I stood slowly. If I reopen that line before the contamination tests are complete, whatever entered this casing enters your homes. Meredith shook her head for the cameras. Fear tactics. I looked at the black sheen floating in the runoff behind her. Chemistry. That was when June Pritchard pushed through the crowd. She was 71, thin as fence wire, with silver hair pinned tightly behind her head. Her husband used a kidney dialysis machine at home 3 nights a week. She stopped inches from me. My husband needs water, she said. Her voice did not shake. That made it worse. I know. Then open the valve. I can't. Her eyes hardened. You mean you won't? I pulled 2 cases of bottled water from the back of my truck and placed them at her feet. This will cover his machine until the emergency tanker arrives. I already sent his medical requirements to county services. June looked down at the bottles. Then toward Meredith. The HOA president was still talking to the reporter. I handed June my phone. The screen showed the inspection camera feed from inside the casing. Brown droplets streaked the steel wall below the shattered seal. If I guess wrong, I said, your husband drinks that. Her anger did not disappear, but it changed direction. By noon, the county had established 2 emergency distribution points. I used my contractor account to order 3 water tankers before the HOA approved a single dollar. Brent stayed and helped isolate the damaged main. Fire crews connected temporary storage bladders near the hydrants. I carried cases to elderly residents until my shirt dried stiff with sweat and chlorine. Meredith issued 2 more statements. One accused me of creating panic. The other promised the HOA would restore service once I ended my illegal shutdown. At 4:40 p.m., June returned with an empty folding table. She set it beside my truck and began organizing bottled water. You should sit down, I told her. You should stop talking and lift that case, she said. Behind us, residents still shouted. In front of us, cameras still watched Meredith. But one family at a time, people began noticing who was giving interviews and who was giving them water. By sunset, the line at our table stretched around the ruined shed. And inside my black maintenance ledger, Meredith's email waited beside 37 years of pressure readings. She had already chosen her story. Now I needed the records to destroy it. By midnight, my workshop looked less like a repair shop and more like a crime scene. Maps covered the workbench. County records hung from clamps above the tool wall. Meredith's emails sat in neat stacks beside the black maintenance ledger. The air smelled of cold coffee, printer toner, and the chlorine still dried into my shirt. Avery Langley arrived carrying 2 banker's boxes and the expression of a woman who had already found something expensive. Avery specialized in utility easements and land use disputes. She was 43, sharp-eyed, patient, and almost impossible to impress. She opened the first box. "You don't have one case," she said. "You have 3. The first was ownership." She spread the original parcel map beneath the fluorescent light. My grandfather's signature sat at the bottom in faded blue ink. The well facility occupied a separate half-acre lot, recorded years before Briarstone's first street existed. The HOA had no architectural authority there, no maintenance authority, no demolition rights. "They were standing on your land while accusing you of trespassing," Avery said. "That sounds like Meredith." The second case was worse. The utility agreement allowed Briarstone to receive water, but Section 11 required the association to protect the sanitary zone and reimburse the operator for any damage caused by residents, contractors, or HOA agents. Avery tapped the paragraph with one fingernail. "They didn't just destroy your property. They violated the agreement that keeps water flowing to their own members." She turned another page. "A contamination clause authorized me to suspend service whenever the casing, treatment equipment, or pressure system faced a credible health threat." The shutdown Meredith called illegal was not optional. It was required. Then Avery opened the second box. "That brings us to intent." Inside was the demolition packet Brent had photographed before leaving the site. The contractor had received a 4-page parcel summary. The county file contained 5 pages. The missing page showed the sanitary protection zone, the active utility registration, and a red warning across the top. "No excavation or structural removal without operator and county approval." I felt the metallic taste of anger return. She removed it. Somebody did. I opened my laptop and pulled up the email chain. 2 days earlier, I had sent Meredith the complete packet. The attachment log showed all 5 pages delivered. 10 minutes later, she forwarded the file to the contractor. Her version contained 4. Avery leaned closer to the screen. "There's your knowledge." We kept digging. At 2:17 a.m., I found the first invoice from Briarstone Phase 2. Meredith's real estate company was listed as exclusive sales representative. Her commission schedule increased if the model home entrance was completed before the investor tour. The stone columns delivered with the excavator had not been ordered by the HOA. Meredith's company had ordered them. The shed was not removed because it violated community standards. It blocked her sales display. Avery sat back slowly. So she destroyed the community's water source to protect a commission. I looked at my father's brass plaque lying on the bench. Brent had pulled it from beneath the collapsed roof. One corner was bent. Mud filled the engraved letters, but the date remained readable. Not abandoned. Not decorative. Not hers. At 3:04 a.m., Avery began drafting emergency motions. I copied pressure logs, inspection reports, camera footage, and every warning I had sent. The evidence printer clicked and hummed beside us. Page after page slid into the tray. Outside, Briarstone streets were dark and dry. Meredith probably thought the silence meant I was losing. She had no idea silence was what evidence sounded like before it entered a courtroom. At 6:12 the next morning, I signed the emergency repair order before Avery finished filing the first motion. Water first, I told her. Then Meredith? Then Meredith. By sunrise, the ruined parcel was crowded with people who understood what a broken well actually meant. County health inspectors in white coveralls. 2 licensed pump technicians. A laboratory team carrying sterile sample cases. Firefighters dragging temporary supply lines across the grass. The air smelled of diesel, wet clay, and disinfectant. Nobody cared how the shed looked anymore. Holly Gaines, director of environmental health, stood beside the exposed casing with a clipboard pressed against her chest. She watched a technician lower a camera into the well. If hydraulic fluid crossed the seal, she said, service stays off. I know. And if bacteria entered? We disinfect the system, flush every line, and test again. She studied my face. You're not arguing. There's nothing to argue about. That seemed to surprise her. Meredith had spent 24 hours telling everyone I was using the shutdown as leverage. I spent those same hours making sure nobody drank contaminated water. The laboratory team collected samples. Brent helped us remove shattered cedar, bent conduit, and pieces of the control cabinet. Every item went onto a numbered tarp before disposal. Evidence first. Cleanup second. At 10:30, a crane lowered a temporary weatherproof enclosure over the surviving equipment. I installed a replacement control panel while another crew repaired the fractured main. My hands moved from habit. Strip the wire. Check the ground. Torque the terminals. Test the relay. The familiar click inside the new cabinet sounded almost like hope. Across the parcel, Avery worked from the hood of her car. Her phone never left her ear. By noon, the county issued a formal contamination hold. The fire department declared Briarstone's hydrant system temporarily impaired. The utility regulator opened an emergency investigation. Then the judge signed Avery's order. The HOA had to preserve every email, contract, map, text message, and financial record connected to the demolition. Its landscaping fund was frozen. No one could enter the well parcel without my written permission or county supervision. Meredith received the order at 12:47. At 1:15, she sent another crew. I heard the trucks before I saw them. A flatbed rolled toward the property carrying the same decorative stone columns from demolition day. Meredith followed in her white SUV, stepped out, and pointed toward the blue sanitary line. We're completing the entrance, she said. Holly looked at her as if she had spoken another language. This site is under a health order. The columns are outside the damaged structure. They're inside the protected well zone, I said. Meredith smiled. Your paint does not define property rights. The contractor unloaded the first stone block. I did not stop him. Neither did Avery. We simply turned toward the security camera mounted above my workshop trailer. Its red light was blinking. The forklift crossed the blue line. One tire crushed the county warning sign flat. The timestamp appeared on my phone. 1:22 and 16 seconds p.m. Avery whispered, "That's violation number 4. Holly called the sheriff. Meredith finally noticed that nobody was arguing with her. No raised voices. No threats. No desperate attempt to block the machine. Just cameras. Clipboards. Witnesses. The sheriff's deputies arrived before the second column touched the ground. They removed the crew, photographed the equipment, and handed Meredith a copy of the court order she had chosen to ignore. Her face tightened around the edges. For the first time, the woman who had controlled every message in Briarstone had nothing prepared to say. Behind her, the temporary control panel clicked again. The repaired pump was ready. But the water would not return until the laboratory cleared it. And Meredith's real problem was no longer the building she had destroyed. It was the evidence she kept creating every time she thought nobody could stop her. Meredith scheduled the emergency HOA meeting for Saturday night because she expected anger to do the work evidence could not. By 6:30, the Briarstone clubhouse was packed wall to wall. 400 dry households had produced a room full of tired faces, unwashed hair, and tempers sharpened by bottled water. The air smelled of sweat, paper cups, and the lemon disinfectant someone had used on the folding chairs. Meredith stood beneath the association seal with a microphone in one hand and a presentation remote in the other. Behind her, the screen displayed my photograph beside 3 words. Private utility extortion. She wore a white suit. Of course she did. We are here, she began, because one individual has chosen to hold an entire community hostage. People shouted before she finished. Some demanded lawsuits. Some demanded my arrest. One man near the front yelled that his restaurant had lost 2 days of business. I entered through the side door carrying 4 things. The black maintenance ledger, my father's bent brass plaque, a thin evidence folder, and a flash drive. No poster boards. No speech prepared. Meredith saw me and smiled as if I had walked into a trap. Mr. Danner has finally decided to face the families he harmed. I set the plaque on the front table. The dented metal struck the wood with a heavy clang. Then Holly Gaines entered behind me. The room changed. She wore her county identification badge and carried the official contamination report. Brent followed her, still in work boots. Avery came next with 2 court officers and a representative from the HOA's insurance carrier. Meredith's smile tightened. Holly took the microphone first. Water service was suspended under county health protocol after demolition exposed an active well casing to hydraulic fluid and surface contamination. The room went quiet. She held up the report. Reopening the system without testing could have exposed every connected residence. Someone asked who ordered the demolition. Brent raised his hand. I did the work, he said. She ordered it. He pointed at Meredith. I warned her it was an active facility. She told us to continue. Meredith reached for the microphone. Avery stepped between them. Before anyone responds, we should watch the recording. I inserted the flash drive. The screen behind Meredith went black. Then the security footage appeared. The timestamp showed 7:51 a.m. Brent's voice came through the speakers. This isn't abandoned. Meredith answered clearly. I don't care what the sign says. Tear the ugly thing down. Nobody moved. The video continued. The bucket crushed the roof. The pressure gauge fell. The pipe ruptured. Then Meredith's voice played again, accusing me of shutting off the neighborhood's water while oil flowed toward the open casing. June Pritchard stood from the second row. That man brought water to my husband, she said, while she stood outside giving interviews. The insurance representative opened a folder. Our preliminary investigation found that the demolition was described as removal of an abandoned decorative structure. That description was materially false. Avery placed the 5-page county packet on the table. Then she placed Meredith's 4-page contractor packet beside it. 1 page was removed, she said. The page identifying this site as an active water facility. She displayed the email chain next. My warning. Her reply, your exaggerations do not create authority. Finally, Avery showed the commission agreement for Briarstone Phase 2. A murmur spread across the room. Meredith had not destroyed the shed for community standards. She had destroyed it because it blocked the entrance to homes she planned to sell. The board called an immediate vote. 7 hands rose to remove her. None opposed. Meredith stepped backward as 2 court officers approached with a preservation order and formal notice of investigation. Her white suit looked gray beneath the fluorescent lights. I picked up my father's plaque. For 37 years, it had identified the building keeping Briarstone alive. That night, it identified the woman who had tried to bury the truth with it. The water came back 6 days after Meredith told the neighborhood I had stolen it. At 5:42 on Thursday morning, Holly Gaines handed me the final laboratory report beneath the temporary floodlights. No petroleum contamination. No coliform bacteria. Chlorine residual within range. System cleared for service. The paper trembled slightly in the wind. Behind us, the rebuilt control cabinet hummed inside a fire-resistant enclosure. New conduit ran along the wall. Fresh concrete sealed the sanitary zone. The air smelled of wet gravel, cold metal, and the sharp cleanliness of disinfectant. I walked to the red isolation valve. Residents had gathered beyond the fence in jackets and bathrobes. Nobody shouted this time. June stood near the front with one hand resting on her husband's wheelchair. Brent leaned against his truck. Avery watched from beside the county inspectors, holding the same thin folder that had ended Meredith's presidency. I wrapped both hands around the valve wheel. For 6 days, every decision had been measured in gallons, test results, emergency deliveries, and sleepless hours. Tankers had supplied drinking water. Fire crews had maintained temporary reserves. Volunteers had carried cases to families who could not drive. Meredith had not carried one. She had spent those days blaming contractors, claiming forged documents, and insisting the missing page had been an administrative accident. The investigators did not believe her. Neither did the insurance company. I turned the wheel. At first, nothing happened. Then a low vibration rose through the concrete beneath my boots. The pump relay clicked. Water surged into the main line with a deep mechanical thud. The pressure gauge moved. 10 psi. 25. 40. Somewhere inside Briarstone, pipes began coughing air. Faucets spat rust-colored bursts before running clear. Toilets filled. Water heaters groaned awake. A child near the fence laughed when a hydrant released a clean silver stream into the drainage ditch. The needle reached 62 psi. exactly where it had rested before the excavator crossed the blue line. June looked toward the houses. Her phone rang. She answered, listened, then covered her mouth with one hand. "It's running," she whispered. Her husband closed his eyes. Nobody cheered immediately. The sound of water moving beneath us was enough. Meredith's consequences arrived less quietly. The HOA's insurer refused coverage for damages connected to intentional misrepresentation. Briarstone's board filed a civil claim against her for emergency water costs, reconstruction expenses, legal fees, and the frozen Phase 2 project. Her real estate license was suspended pending investigation. The county cited her for unauthorized demolition inside a protected utility zone. Prosecutors opened a case involving document alteration, property destruction, and violation of the court's preservation order. The white SUV disappeared from Briarstone before the month ended. The new board asked me to design the replacement well house. They expected concrete walls and a steel roof. Instead, residents voted to rebuild it in the shape of my father's old cedar shed. We used fire-rated siding, reinforced doors, cameras, impact barriers, and a permanent fence around the sanitary zone. But from the road, it looked almost the same. Weathered gray boards. A modest metal roof. Nothing luxurious. On the morning we finished, I mounted my father's brass plaque above the door. The bent corner stayed. So did the scratches left by the excavator. Danner Well Facility, 1989. Below it, the new board added another plaque. Essential community infrastructure. Protected by law. I stood there listening to the steady hum behind the wall. Meredith wanted the ugliest building in Briarstone erased. Instead, she taught 400 families which building mattered most. Justice did not arrive with sirens or speeches. It came quietly, patiently, and inevitably. At 62 pounds per square inch, through every pipe she tried to destroy.